Welcome back, everyone. Well, I thought it would be appropriate to wrap up this section about landscape painting by answering some common questions that students have when they're learning about painting their landscape. Now, before we get to some of the questions, I just want to frame where we are at. I'm currently in my map sculpting level. I've got my landscape tab here selected. I'm currently in paint mode. And in the World Outliner, I have my landscape selected, and this is where I assigned my M material created, my landscape material. Now currently, I've got this entire map is filled with grass, and you can fill your level with grass or any of these other layers by simply right-clicking on it and saying Fill Layer. Now, my first question here is, when I first paint on a layer, the landscape goes checkerboard for a bit. Why? And this is talking about a new layer, one that has not been painted on before. So if I was to select, say, my gravel layer here, and I come into my landscape and I left click to try applying this, you can see how things go checkerboard. And as you see down in the right hand corner, this is simply because the shaders are compiling. It takes a moment for the engine to apply this gravel onto our landscape. And there you see it appearing, those checkerboards go away and all is well. And once it's on there, you can simply left click and your gravel will appear without it going checkerboard. Okay, so that is the answer to question number one. Question number two, my landscape stays in a checkerboard pattern once I paint more layers on it. I believe this is too many layers on it, but they just say more layers on it. Why and how can I fix this? Okay, I know what this question is talking about, so let's explore this phenomenon. Now notice, I'm going to be painting different layers onto a single landscape component, this square area right here. I've currently got some grass and some gravel. Let me find some mud. I'll paint some mud on here, which I had on here before the video started, and I deleted it, and now I'm going to get some mud back. You see it went checkerboard there because it's got to recompile the shaders there. And it's slowing my frame rate down here quite considerably. So now I've got some mud, some gravel, and some grass. Sorry for the stuttering frame rates. Let's go to a rock layer. Gonna apply that, and as you can see, it's compiling the shaders. It goes checkerboard temporarily, and of course impacts my frame rate here a little bit. Okay, so grass, gravel, mud, rock. Let's try a little bit of snow here. Sorry, selecting snow. And it goes checkerboard once again. Compiling those shaders. Compile, compile, compile. And just about finished compiling, but uh-oh. It did not finish. It's still this checkerboard. What is going on? Well, between videos here, I shouldn't say mistakenly, I purposely changed my M material created. Let me just jump inside of here. And I changed it so that all my texture sample nodes had a sample source of from texture asset. Every single one I changed to be from texture asset. Now the problem with leaving all of your texture samples here inside of your landscape material to from texture asset is you're limited to how many different layers you can paint onto a single landscape component. Now we only painted on 4 or 5 layers there, and then we got this checkerboard. That simply blows. That's not cool. So how can we go about fixing that? The fix for this, as was mentioned in previous videos, is to select all your texture sample nodes, and I will do this between videos here, but all of them, anything that says texture sample in here, including these variants, as well as these normal textures down here, way down here, all of them, and changing their sampler source to shared wrap. Now when you do this, you're going to open up a whole new world for you, because now you can apply up to 128 unique textures per landscape component, which is a lot more than your limited version that you saw there of 4 or 5. So I'm going to go ahead and change all these back here in a little bit. So then you will see that this will no longer be checkerboard. So pausing the video here, I'll join you in a little bit. And welcome back. Now you can see that my landscape component here is no longer showing that gray checkerboard, but it is showing all of my different painted on layers. And all I did was I changed all the texture samples here to be shared wrapped. That is the key to making it so that you can paint multiple texture layers onto your landscape. All right, next question. Is there another way to view how many different layers I have painted onto another component, as opposed to just counting like, oh, there's some grass, gravel, 1, 2, 3, 4. Manually counting them is no good, right? Yes, in fact, there is. Now, this is a little bit of a sneak peek to some landscape visualizers we're going to be talking about later on in the course, but in your viewport, if you come under Lit, Landscape Visualizers, you can show layer usage instead of normal. And watch what happens when we do this. It changes it to this find view, and these numbers correspond to how many different landscape layers you have painted per component. And as you can see, we've got 5 currently on this landscape component, and all these different colors correspond to different landscape layers that we've got here. So this yellow one indicates we've got some rock. And you can see I've got 1 mostly on every component, except I've got a couple 2s here. Looks like some grass as well as some mud in areas over there as well. The mud must be very faint in some of those areas. So that's a pretty cool visualizer. And again, that was under Lit, Landscape Visualizers, Layer Usage. I'm going to set this back to normal. Okay, next question. Question is, I deleted out a layer from my landscape material, and now I see a question mark in my list of possible painting layers. What is this, and what can I do about this? Well, I currently don't have any like that, but I can show you how to replicate this. And I'm going to have to temporarily destroy my landscape material so you can see what this question is talking about. So let me just jump into my M material created. And I'm going to find my rock in my landscape blend nodes. We got our layer blends, and let's find where the rock was. There's path, there is rock. I'm going to simply delete this one out of here. So right here, there's a little drop down arrow. I'm going to delete that. And then also down below in the normals, if you will, we're going to select that layer blend node, and I'm going to find where the rock layer is, and I'm going to delete that out. And I'm going to save this. It's going to recompile, and I will join you in just a bit. All right, and we are back. The shaders have finished compiling, and here we are back in my landscape tab with my paint tab selected under that. And in my list of layers, you can notice that my rock layer has this question mark icon instead. This is known as an orphaned layer. If a layer is removed from your landscape material after it has populated the target layers list of a landscape, and it has painted data on the landscape, it's going to be displayed with that question mark icon like we see here. Now, you can delete orphan layers from the landscape, though it's recommended that you first paint over any areas where the layer was used. And I've got a little rock right here. The painted layer data is preserved until the layer is deleted. So no information is lost if you make a mistake in the landscape, in your landscape material. So let's go ahead and delete out our rock blend here. If we select this and I hold down Shift and left click, that's going to get rid of all rock exposure here. No rock. In fact, I could simply right click on this, clear layer, and that should get rid of all of our rock. And now once our rock is gone, whenever our shaders are compiling, my screen jitters a little bit, we can simply X out to delete this layer. Are you sure? We will say yes. And boom, it is gone. Rock is no longer present in our list of target layers. Now, I'm going to put that back in my M material created here in just a moment. I don't recommend that you do that if you want to paint some rock. I'm going to put that back here in just a little bit. One final question before we wrap this up. The question reads, what does the hardness parameter in a landscape layer info object determine? Well, for starters, what are they talking about here? Here in my paint tab, we've got our different landscape layers. These are our landscape layer info objects assigned to each layer. Let me jump to our grass layer info because that is the one that we have applied across our landscape here. If you click right here, you'll jump to where this asset is in your content browser. There it is. I'm going to double click on this asset to open it up. And inside of here, there is this hardness setting, which by default is set to 0.5. Now, what this determines is when we use the erosion tool in our landscape, how much does the erosion sculpting tool affect that given layer type? So I'm going to set this to 1, jack it all the way up because I can't go above 1. I'm going to save this. I'm going to go back to my map. I'm going to go back to Landscape Sculpting Tools and let me find my erosion tool right here. And I'm going to have all default settings over here, nothing changed. I've got my layer selected. And now if I find a ridge to sculpt upon, I'm just going to left click and it flattens it maybe a little bit, but I don't really see much of a difference at all. 1 equals a hard value. I should probably fly over to the ridge over here to make that a little bit easier to see the impact. Okay, so let me jump back into my grass layer info and let's change the hardness from 1 to, well, let's go a little bit softer, 0.05. And now if I save that, go back into my map, have my erosion tool here, and I left click, you can see that it flattens it a lot more. Now, it may be a subtle difference, maybe a little bit hard to detect, but it does make the terrain a little bit softer, a little bit easier to apply erosion. So that's what that does. I'm going to set this back to 0.5, where it was before, save it, and jump back to my map. Well, guys, that's going to do it all for some painting Q&A for our landscape. We will see you all in the next video.